I have a story about that. So I was in the
Yes.
playrooms at Naughty New Orleans, and there you have to be dressed down or nude. And my wife and I were nude. And it was really interesting because we were walking down the hallway, and this woman who I know, but I hadn't seen her since last year. We've never had sex together, but we've talked, and she's a customer and stuff like that. And she walks up, and she's also naked, and she puts her arm around me, and she says, I just had amazing sex. And yes, I'm on Shameless Desire. And yes, it works, which was just so great. It was so refreshing to actually see people in person and loving it.
Welcome to Please Me, a sexuality podcast where we challenge shame, close the pleasure gap, and have the conversations most people were never taught to have. I'm Eve Hall, a sexual health physical therapist, sexuality educator, and advocate for the sexual longevity movement. Every week, I sit down with leading experts, thought leaders, and change makers to explore the science of sexual health, the art of intimacy, and the power of authentic connection. I'll also share solo episodes designed to help you better understand your body, strengthen your relationships, and embrace pleasure throughout every stage of life. Please Me is intended for mature audiences, so sit back, relax, and surrender to the pleasure of Please Me. I love wearing a bra, said no one ever. If you're tired of discomfort and want a great bra alternative, I highly recommend Cakes. I gave up bras during COVID and searched everywhere for something better, and Cakes is the best solution I've found. They offer adhesive, non-adhesive, and push-up options that give a seamless look under your clothes without straps or discomfort. If you're tired of racing to your car to pull your bra off at the end of the day, it's time to get your Cakes. I haven't looked back, and I know you won't regret it. Check the show notes for the link. Ladies, let's get personal for a minute. What does your vaginal health routine look like? Because as we mature, our intimate self-care needs an upgrade. If hormone shifts have you feeling dry, less sensitive, or just not quite like yourself, I've got a simple 3-step protocol I'm loving. Every morning I use my lady pump to increase blood flow and wake up the lady bits. And yes, it comes with 3 attachments for all the sensations. Then I apply Shamelessly Aroused by Shameless Care, formulated with sildenafil, the active ingredient used in Viagra, to support stronger arousal, better lubrication, and more responsive orgasms. Pair that with a daily self-love ritual, and you got a powerful daytime combo. At night, I use Parlor Games estrogen and progesterone creams to support healthy hormone levels and resilient vaginal tissue. Fewer oops moments when I sneeze, and way more confidence when intimacy calls. Dryness, decreased sensitivity, frequent UTIs, incontinence, low blood flow? These 3 upgrades can be a total game changer, because intimate health isn't indulgent, it's essential. And trust me, you'll feel the difference. What if I told you that this is the safest time in human history to be sexually active? Not because sexually transmitted infections have disappeared, but because we've never had more evidence-based tools to prevent them. With that being said, I want to welcome Robert Johnson to the show. He has been on the show multiple times and is really one of the people that I so support in his work because he has the tools that we're talking about. So with that being said, I want to welcome you to the show, Robert. How are you today?
I'm great, Eve. Thank you so much.
So you actually put this idea of this episode into my mind because you had a blog post that I received, or maybe it was an email blast, and it was talking about this very thing. And I thought, wow, a lot of times we are taught about sex in a fear-based foundation, right? Be careful not to get STIs, don't have sex. But I feel like today the conversation is changing. And I think that that is so exciting. So I want to talk about all of the different things that have happened in the last, say, 20 years. Say that our parents were not exposed to, right? And these are things that now we have as common things that everybody's getting. I know that the other day when I was at the doctor's office with my 13-year-old, she got her HPV vaccine for the first time, and that's so exciting. Let's talk a little bit about HPV because I think that there's some really great statistics about how that has changed for the landscape of this particular STI.
Well, isn't it such a blessing that your daughter gets that at such a young age? That's something that I missed out on, Eve. I'm assuming that you missed out
I
on
did
it as
too.
well. and most of your listeners did as well. So HPV, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's a family of about 200 different strains of a virus, human papilloma virus, and it's been called the glitter of the sexual health world. It's basically, and people don't like to hear this, Eve, but it's basically unavoidable because it is just everywhere. And the CDC estimates that basically everybody who's sexually active is going to be exposed to one or more strains of HPV in their lifetime. So if you're someone who is sex positive, I hate to say it, but HPV is probably just going to be a part of your life. But the great news, and this is why the CDC doesn't talk a lot about prevention or testing, but instead focuses on vaccination, because we have this wonderful gift from the science gods, if you will, the HPV vaccine, which is dramatically reduced cervical cancer rates and undoubtedly will reduce the rest of the cancers associated with HPV as well, which is just great news.
It really is. And anytime we can reduce something like cancer, that is such a massive change in our health in general, not just our sexual health, but our health in general. And that does also relate. And a lot of times people think of it as just cervical cancer, right? But men can also get penile cancer. You can get cancer in your throat from this very virus, right? It's a viral infection. And if you get the vaccine, it will prevent certain strains that are more prevalent, right? And so it's such an important vaccine to get. And unfortunately, I know that when I became a newly single woman in my 40s after my divorce, I wanted to get the HPV vaccine. And I actually asked my doctor, and they said, oh, well, you're too old to get the vaccine. We don't recommend it for people over, I don't even remember how old it was at that point. Can we speak on that a little bit? Because you can advocate for yourself if you are not within that age range to get the vaccine. And I think that if I would have known that at that time, I would have certainly gotten the vaccine at that time. So, do you want to just speak on that a little bit?
Sure. Well, a little history first, Eve, if we will. It came out in 2006, and at first it was only given to girls, like your daughter. In about 2013 or so, I think they started deciding, why don't we just give this to boys as well? And they did. And at that time, I think the top age where it was recommended and your insurance would cover it was 26, I believe. They've since increased that to 45. So if you're 45 or below, your doctor can write a prescription for it and it's on label. And that means prescribing something in a way that's FDA approved and et cetera. And your insurance will probably cover it. And that's a really great thing because these series of 3 injections are not inexpensive, no matter where you get them. But if you're 45 or less, your insurance will almost certainly cover them. Your mileage may vary on that. But if you happen to be over the age of 45 and you would still like to get vaccinated, I think you certainly should. I think you should pursue that. But you're going to have to find a physician who's willing to write that off label. And for those of you listening, I'm doing air quotes here for off label. And essentially, what that means is that the doctor has examined you, examined your situation. Maybe you're getting back into the dating pool at 48 years old or something like that. It's like, yeah, this person's going to live a good long life. Hopefully, they may be exposed to HPV. They may develop cancer 20, 30 years from now. Let's take a step today to hopefully prevent that, write that prescription for that vaccine, and then give it to the person. Now, one thing that people need to be aware of is that the vaccine is not inexpensive. I've talked to Planned Parenthood before. They say it's about $700 for the 3 injections. I think that varies depending upon your income. They have sliding scales in several places. I called a local CVS here locally in the Chicago suburbs. They told me $1,300. Nonetheless, it's not free. But I think when you look at having a good long life and hopefully several decades ahead of you, it's probably something that people should absolutely consider. And I would encourage you to just keep trying to talk to physicians until you find one that's willing to write that prescription.
Absolutely. It's really so worth it. And so definitely look into it if that's you and you're over 45 and you are sexually active or engaging in sexual activity with more than one partner. All of those things can lead to you being more exposed to the viral infection. And because it is so prevalent, right, we want to avoid getting that. So, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about safety. And great sex starts with feeling safe. not just physically, right? And not just emotionally, I should say, but physically as well, right? And so sexual safety isn't about fear, it's about freedom. And I want to talk a little bit about freedom today because I feel like this conversation is helping all of us to step into a space that's more free for all of us, right? So, not so lined in fear, but really stepping into a place where we feel safe to explore our sexuality and to really be free. And I think that that is a beautiful place to be. So, do you want to just speak a little bit about what your thoughts are on that particular thing that I just said?
Well, I may not be the right person to speak on it, Eve, because we were at Naughty New Orleans together and we gave a presentation on STIs. Anna, my partner, and I did. And I thought it was going to reassure everyone. And at the end, I said, raise your hand if you feel better about STIs. And not a single hand went up, which was the exact opposite of what I wanted. I believe that if I could properly convey to people where we are scientifically
Right.
in terms of prevention and where we are in terms of the actual number of infections and the consequences and treatments thereof, that people would probably stop worrying about STIs altogether. I know that I know quite a bit about them. I have some expertise in this field now after working in it in several years, and they aren't something that I worry about or fear. And I know that might sound really weird to people, but I could walk you through every single infection and talk about if you're at risk of this, there's this preventative measure, this medication, this treatment if you do happen to get it, etc. And it's absolutely freeing, Eve, because life is very short. You're going to die of something. It's almost certainly not going to be chlamydia or gonorrhea or even HIV at this point in 2026, which is just absolutely amazing. And people deserve to live whatever kind of sex life it is that they want to live. And I would equate it to whenever I got a vasectomy and just no longer having to worry about pregnancy being a part of the sexual picture. Now, obviously, children, it's the whole, I mean, none of us would be here unless people procreated, right? I'm not denigrating that. I'm just saying that those of us who have reached an age where we've already had our children or just decided we're not going to, and we take measures to prevent that, and suddenly you're not having to worry about pregnancy as a part of sex, how much better sex can be because you've just set aside that anxiety. Now do that same thing with STIs, and it's a really magical thing indeed. And again, I'm not talking about being irresponsible. There are certainly people that don't worry about STIs that probably should because they're taking no preventative measures and they don't know much about it. I'm suggesting that once you really dig in and learn a lot about them and are taking the measures necessary to prevent them or to understand the risks that you're taking, it's a really magical thing in my opinion.
I agree. I 100% agree. And I think that this is what I want to convey in this particular episode is that you can have sexual freedom and you can have a decrease in the fear around STIs when the tools to prevent the STIs that are commonly found, right? And
Mhm.
having sexually transmitted infection, there's absolutely no shame in it. Okay, number one. And number two, it's like having a cold, right? It's either a virus or it's a bacteria, one or the other, just like the flu or the common cold. One is
Mhm.
a virus, one is a bacteria. It's like having a cold down there, right? And so it's not the end of the world. And I think that a lot of times, because there's so much shame around sexuality, that shame gets attached to having an STI and it doesn't have to be there. You can throw that shit away, right? And I want to delve into some of the tools that are available for people, for everybody, right? Let's first start because I think that this is the scariest one, right? AIDS. AIDS is something that did in 30 years ago kill people, right? But now you can have something called right? Or undetectable HIV, where you can be taking, if you do have HIV, you could be taking medication and the medication is literally causing it to be undetectable in your body and so you cannot transmit it to other people as long as you're on the proper regimen, right? So let's just touch upon that first, because I think that's the scariest one out of all of them.
Well, absolutely. So yeah, you're exactly right. Undetectable equals untransmittable. You equals you. And this is thanks to modern medicine, essentially. And I think a lot of us are at the age where we remember, for example, when Magic Johnson was HIV positive and how frightening that was. And we expected to see Magic Johnson get sick and pass away. And here he is still alive and well in 2026 and thriving and seems like one of the healthiest people on the planet. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. That's modern medicine for you. And of course, in 2012, Eve, PrEP was released, and that was brought to us by Gilead and the United States government kind of combined forces and developed that together. Not to get off track, but a lot of people don't realize this, but the government did enough funding of that project that they could have patented it, but instead they just allowed Gilead to have the patent, and that's kind of modern medicine in the United States. But Gilead has definitely cleaned up from that. But nonetheless, countless people around the world have had their lives saved and changed because of PrEP. And so PrEP is something, if you're not familiar, if you are at high risk of HIV, you can take a medication, either a tablet you take once a day or an injection that you get every 6 months. And it takes your risk of HIV down to practically zero for all intents and purposes. And that's been life changing for so many different people.
Amazing. It really is amazing. And so let's talk a little bit about prevention for chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis. Let's talk about DoxyPEP and that tool that everyone should have in their toolbox, right? And I talk a lot about, creating a sexual health bug out bag, right? And I've done a couple episodes about that and webinars in the past. And this is one tool that I highly recommend everybody have in their sexual health bug out bag or in your medicine cabinet. Let's talk about it.
Sure. DoxyPEP is the antibiotic doxycycline that a lot of people have been on for acne or who knows what. Almost everybody listening to me right now has been on doxycycline at some point in their life. And it's essentially where you take a single dose, which is 200 milligrams within 72 hours after unprotected sex. And all three of those bacterial STIs, gonorrhea, chlamydia, and syphilis, can spread quite easily from oral sex. So unprotected oral sex is also unprotected sex as far as that goes. And it lessens your likelihood of contracting gonorrhea, chlamydia, and syphilis. Gonorrhea, much less so. When it first started, it was about 50%. Now it's probably less than that, to tell you the truth. And we can talk about that if you want to, Eve. But for syphilis and chlamydia, there's no resistance to doxycycline at all. And so that's pretty consistently been reducing the risk by about 90%, which is phenomenal because particularly when it comes to women, women's health is really impacted by both of those infections, but chlamydia in particular can lead to pelvic inflammatory disease and infertility, and chlamydia rates in women are really, really high. So DoxyPEP is an important tool for people who feel like they're living a high risk sexual lifestyle, whether that's for multiple partners or maybe you've just had these infections in the past. Maybe you're just naturally susceptible to chlamydia for some reason. You've had a couple of chlamydia infections in your life. But this is something that can be prescribed to both men and women through a shared decision making process between you and your physician. And of course, we also have it at shamelesscare.com if somebody wants to get it fairly quickly and fairly easily, and they can use Eve's coupon code. And Eve, I believe that's Please Me. Is that right?
Yes, it's please me. And yeah, absolutely. I feel like everybody should have DoxyPEP on hand because really, when you're having a new sexual experience and you have something like a condom break, or maybe you weren't planning on having that oral sex, but it was things got changed around and you ended up experiencing some oral sex that you weren't planning on. Again, unwanted exposure, unprotected sex, right? So anytime you're having unprotected sex in any shape or form, whether it be penetrative or otherwise, right? Even spitting on somebody can be unprotected sex, right? And so if you are experiencing these things, you should always have DoxyPEP on hand. So and also tell your friends about it, right? Everybody should know about this medication. It's something that's so important for everybody to know about, to be honest. And if you're listening right now and you have some girlfriends or guy friends that should know about this and maybe they don't, send them this episode because I think it's so essential for people to really understand all of these tools. So let's talk more. Let's talk more about some more tools. So let's talk about routine STI screening. And I know that this is very individual, but I think it's really essential. So let's talk about what your thoughts are on routine STI screening.
Well, I think, Eve, that everybody recognizes that they should get tested, and a lot of people are. When I was at Naughty New Orleans, we talked to hundreds of people. We spent a lot of time at our booth. We also gave presentations and things like that. And these were mostly swingers or people who consider themselves to be in the lifestyle, but I don't think that their thoughts and beliefs are much different than anybody else who's sex positive or sexually active. And every single person that we talked to was getting STI tested routinely and quite proudly so. And of course, no matter what doctor, what clinic you go to, it's probably going to have the basics, meaning like things that everybody's aware of, like HIV, syphilis. Those are terms that everybody is afraid of, cautious of, knows should be included in a test. So instead, I like to focus on the things that people don't really automatically know about, and virtually no one at Naughty New Orleans knew about, which breaks my heart because we've been talking about this at Shameless Care for years. And that would be 3-site gonorrhea and chlamydia testing. So gonorrhea and chlamydia are site-specific bacterial infections. You can have them in your genitals, and everybody's familiar with that. You can also have them in your anus or in your throat, mouth cavity, throat. And so whenever you get an STI test, it needs to include an anal swab, an oral swab, and a genital test as well. And when we first started STI testing at shamelesscare.com, we used to tell people, hey, look, if you don't have any anal sex, then you don't have to worry about the anal swab. But I was wrong about that, Eve. And I've been seeing more and more research out there showing how high the rates are of anal chlamydia in women. And I think it makes sense in women, Eve, because those holes, not to be crass, but they're very close to each other and everybody kind of
Right.
knows that.
Hmm.
And anybody that's ever had sex knows that fluids are going various places and that transmission can easily occur. What people are often surprised by, and what I was surprised by, Eve, is the number of anal chlamydia cases in heterosexual men who deny any history of anal sex. And the leading theory now is that chlamydia can survive the digestive tract and actually lodge itself in the bowel. So a man performs cunnilingus. Next thing, he has a chlamydia infection in his anus. And so I'm not trying to scare anybody. That's not common by any means. But I am trying to point out that when you go get STI tested, if your testing does not include oral and anal swabs, then you've missed more infections than you've detected. And at that point, you really have to ask yourself, what was the point of getting tested in the first place? So that would be the first thing that I would say. The second thing would be a couple of other infections that are almost always missed but are extraordinarily common. One of which is Mycoplasma genitalium, which is a sexually transmitted infection. It's a bacteria. And the other one is Trichomonas, which is a parasite. Again, very, very common. And all of these things are fairly easy to treat. They're not going to cause long-term damage unless you don't know that you have them for a long period of time. And that's exactly why screening is so critically important.
Absolutely. And Shameless Care, I will say, has a 14 panel test that includes blood work, it includes urine work, and it includes swabbing your throat and your anus. So you are really going to get the most comprehensive test that you can find on the market today, to be honest. I mean, I haven't really found anything that's more comprehensive. And this is why I keep bringing you on, Robert, because I think it's so important for people to understand that it is so important to get routinely tested, even if you are married, right? Even if you are, it is important to get tested. And the whole chlamydia thing and living in your intestine, I didn't know that. So I love it when I can learn something new. And so, wow, men are having chlamydia even when they're not having anal sex. But again, fluids can circulate, right? And if you are doing any kind of oral sex and you're using saliva, that can kind of like go down there into the anal area as well and can infect as well. So important to be tested in all the orifices. So your test specifically, though, I want to say is a home STI test. So it would be something that you would get on shamelesscare.com. And again, you could use code please me, but it is a home test. So do you want to just talk like very briefly about like the procedure and what you need to do in order to get a test like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were kind of forced to use a home collection because the nation's walk-in lab. So if you order an STI test online and it says, order today, there's a lab in your neighborhood, that's true, but those labs do not do oral or anal swabs. And so the choice that we had was to find a lab that would allow for at-home collection or to skip the 3-site gonorrhea and chlamydia collection. And the whole company is based upon this idea of thorough STI testing. So we just couldn't do those walk-in testing centers. And so when somebody orders a test through us, they provide their medical information through a HIPAA compliant patient portal, probably takes 5 minutes to fill out. And then it's reviewed by a board certified physician in their state. And that's another differentiator between Shameless Care and I think any other telehealth provider is that the doctor is involved with your testing at Shameless Care right from the get go. And so even if two people from the same household order tests together in Iowa, the two people are probably going to have two different doctors because each patient is assigned a different doctor, if you will. But the doctor reviews the information, which includes things like allergies, what other medications you're on. Are you on HIV preventative medications? Have you ever tested positive for syphilis before? Basic information like this. And then the test kit goes to the patient's home where they do the sample collection themselves. It takes me as little as 6 minutes, but I'm very good at it. I've done it several times. If you're not quite as good as me, you haven't had the practice that I've had, it's probably going to take you more like 15 or 20 minutes. I think that's fair to say. And then you mail it back to the lab and you get your test results back within 2 business days of it reaching the lab. And the best part is you're probably not going to test positive, but if you do, that same physician becomes aware of the test results at the same moment that you do. And if you had like a chlamydia infection or MGen or trick or something like that, the prescription is already sent to your local pharmacy. If you chose Walgreens, you just hit the drive-in at Walgreens and boom, you're all set as far as that goes. And so that's really nice as well, because you really do not want to order a test kit somewhere, find out that you're positive, and then you have to take these test results from swabmybutt.com or wherever you got the test. Hopefully that's not a company. I'm not making fun. It's just the only thing I come up with. And walk into your local nurse in the box at CVS or something like that. And of course, their question is going to be, is this a real test? Like, where did you get this? They're not just going to treat you right off the bat. It's really critically important, I think, that you have physicians that are intimately tied in together with that testing process so that they trust the results even and that they'll treat you properly.
100%. And that you don't have to go walk into your local, I don't know, medical office and have to explain to them that you tested positive for gonorrhea or chlamydia or whatever it is. It can be a little embarrassing, these conversations, right? And so you avoid all of that and you are just treated right away from the doctors through shameless care. So I really do think that this is such a great service that you provide, because it's more anonymous, but you are getting the care 100% that you need in any situation. So let's talk a little bit about honest communication and what sorts of things we should be talking to about STIs with our partners, right? Because I feel like a lot of times people are not having enough conversation around this. And so I would love to hear your thoughts about what sorts of things we should be having conversations about before we jump into bed with somebody.
Well, that's the $1 million question or the $100,000 question or whatever they say. I don't know. That game show I think was a little bit before my time, but yeah, that is the magical question. I can tell you that in the swinger lifestyle community, like at Naughty New Orleans, if I had to guess, I don't know that there was a single conversation about this that took place and there was 3,000 people there. That's just my instinct from being around the community for a while. And if you think about, Eve, what people do, they almost religiously use condoms for penis and vaginal sex, and that's great. But then almost never use any sort of protection for oral sex. And there's certain things in that community, and I know that that community is probably like a minority of your listener base. It's just the community that I'm most familiar with. Think about the faith that they're putting in that condom at that point, Eve, because they've not had any conversations about STI testing or what those people have been tested for or what they haven't, or are they on DoxyPEP or are they on PrEP or any of these things. All they've agreed to is we're going to use a condom for penis and vaginal sex, as if that condom is somehow going to erase anything that takes place in that obligatory 15, 20 minutes of oral sex that people have as foreplay before they even reach for the condom out of their bag. So I really do think that people should begin to have these conversations. Now, when you have the conversation and how you have the conversation is difficult. It's more difficult than people imagine, even. I've often thought, just like with consent, if people stop pretending that it's easy, then we can start to have a real conversation about it. For example, Eve, let's think about the average kind of cycle or whatever dynamic, whatever you would want to call it. Let's say I go to the bar tonight, Eve, and I meet a woman there. And we're flirting. If you think about the natural progression of things, now there is no normal sex. Normal is only a setting on the dryer, as people say. But typically I would say that you're having a great conversation. You might ask if you can touch. She says yes. I touch her. I see how she responds. Maybe she touches me back. At some point, I'm going to ask her if she'd like to kiss me or if I can kiss her, vice versa. You see where this is going. Now, let's say that I had an oral HSV1 infection. When should I bring that up? Well, it would have to be before the kissing takes place, but that feels a little awkward to me, to be honest with you. And I think the truth is, like, this is always going to be a little awkward and there's no right or wrong way to do it. But I do think that the conversation has to take place. And whenever I've had the conversation in real life with real people, what we ultimately end up doing is showing each other our test results, primarily because that other person quickly realizes that I know more about it than than she does. And so just showing me the test results is probably like the easiest way rather than me quizzing her about what she's been tested for. So I wish I had like, this is definitively how you do it, Eve, but I just feel like this whole idea of romance and seduction is a little bit complicated and every situation is different. What are your thoughts about it, Eve?
I agree that it is an uncomfortable conversation when you're just meeting somebody and say you are in the swinger world, right? And you are wanting to have sex with somebody that you've never met before. And you are just in a club or maybe at a convention like Naughty New Orleans where we were at, and you're meeting new people for the first time. Absolutely, sharing test results is essential. That's probably like the easiest way to do it. Let's swap results. Let's talk about what's going on. Are there any things that we should be avoiding because of the tests and anything that we are positive for? For instance, when you have herpes, you have it for life, right? And
Yeah.
so your partner, if you are being actually having a conversation and being truthful, you should be telling your partner about that. HPV is another one. So if you're positive for these things or HIV, you should be telling your partner so that they can make an informed decision about whether they want to move forward with you or not. And I think that that is essential. I think it's important for us to be having these conversations. And hey, if they say, what, it's okay. I think I'll pass, but it was really nice talking to you. That's okay. You don't have to have sex with everybody that you want to have sex with. And you will eventually find someone that says, hey, I have herpes too. No big deal. Or I have HPV too. No big deal, because they are extremely common. So let's talk about how common these viral infections are, those two specifically.
Well, the statistics are a little bit all over the place, Eve, but I know that with oral HPV, about 7% of the population in the United States has it right now, if you were just to sample people. Now, what those strains are, those are sort of all over the place, and most of them are pretty harmless. In men, we really have no idea because HPV, like gonorrhea and chlamydia, is site specific. And so, if you think about it, let's think about women for a minute, Eve. Let's say that a woman goes to her pap smear, and during that pap smear, they do an HPV test. And they call her back in a couple days and say, well, you have HPV. Well, if that result was negative, it still doesn't mean that she didn't have HPV. She could have it anally or orally. What they
Right.
tested was her genitals. And a lot of people don't know that. And then with men, there's basically no testing at all. I mean, there are a couple of labs that, although the medical establishment basically has disavowed it or not encouraged it, there are a couple of labs that are selling oral HPV tests. But then what have you found out? Whether you have oral HPV or not, at least at that particular moment in time. Now it can go away and come back, and maybe you tested negative, but you're going to test positive for it in 2 weeks, something like that. But you still have no way to collect cells from inside of the penis. So when the medical establishment looks at what's going on with HPV, the conversation is not even really about testing. The reason why women get tested during their pap smear is because they're then going to get a different kind of screening for cervical cancer because their risk just went up. It's not really to find out your status so that you don't spread it to other people, because from a practical matter, it's just not very practical because of all the reasons that I said. And I'll give you another example. Let's say that my wife goes to the doctor tomorrow and finds out that she has HPV. I'm never going to have that. There's not a test that I can take, Eve. So when I go to the next sex party, I don't have to say that I have HPV. I have no idea if I do or not. And so the
Right.
conversation on HPV really becomes about vaccination because of that point. It's almost reached sort of like an endemic perspective if people understand that from COVID, where it's just now going to be a part of our life and vaccination is the key. moving forward. Now, with herpes simplex virus, the statistics are sort of all over the place. Some of them say 70% of the population already has one or the other form of HSV. Another may say 50%. I don't know what the actual number is, but what I do know is that it's very, very high. And the more interesting thing in the conversations that I have to keep having conversations with doctors about at Shameless Care is that HSV2, we can no longer call that genital herpes, and HSV1, we can no longer call it oral herpes because those
Right.
terms, while those two strains still exist, HSV1, which used to be almost exclusively oral, has now become the predominant form of genital herpes. And the reason why is really interesting, at least to a nerd like me. It's because the number of children being raised with cold sores has decreased. And hopefully this is making sense. But essentially, people have kind of caught on that cold sore that you get, that's a type of herpes. So maybe don't kiss the baby anymore, grandma, that sort of thing.
On the
And that's
lips,
been
right? Kiss
great.
them on the cheek.
Yeah. And that's been great because the number of children reaching adulthood with HSV has decreased by about 30% in the past 30 years. And that's a significant drop. The downside is those young people are then susceptible to contracting HSV1 for the very first time as adults when someone performs oral sex on them. And that's really what's happened. And so herpes as well, it's something that nobody wants, but it's also something that potentially most people have, or at least close to half of them have. And protecting yourself becomes very difficult. And it's also something that's a little bit unfair in a conversation like what you were hinting at a minute ago, Eve, where you're trying to have this conversation. Let's say that I had HSV1 and I'm trying to have this conversation with somebody. She may well also have HSV1, but have no idea what I'm talking about when I'm trying to have this conversation with her. But that's just the cost of having grown up conversations, and sometimes they don't go as well as we'd hope.
Absolutely, because you're absolutely right. There are many people that have these sexually transmitted infections and they don't necessarily have symptoms, so they don't even know that they have them, right? And that happens a lot in men too, where they're very asymptomatic with a lot of these infections. So I still think it's important to talk about. I personally like to consider myself the face of safe sex, right? And so I think it's super important that you have any of these infections to share with your new partners or your partners in general. As soon as you find out, you talk about it, right? And the person has to, on the other side, one, go get tested. If you are suddenly positive, they should know that about themselves as well. And also have informed consent so that they can move forward if they want to or not. I think that that's essential. And listen, plenty of people have these infections. It's not like you're never going to have sex again. I promise you. The whole point of this conversation is to say that this is the time in history, right, where sexuality and sexual exploration is the safest it's ever has been because we have all of these tools, right? And so I want to jump into our role play. Are you ready for it?
Yes, Eve, but real quick, would it be okay if I ran
Absolutely.
people through a 45-second timeline of all the breakthroughs that have happened in my lifetime? Would that be
Do
okay?
it, do it. Let's do that. Yes, I would love that because, yeah, I want to cover all of that. And I'm sure that there are so many more that we didn't even touch upon. So go for it.
Okay, well, I'm 46 years old, Eve, and so in these are just in my lifetime. So if you compare the type of safe sex that I can have compared to my parents, it's a completely different ball game. And so earlier when we were talking about people should feel better about these things, I really hope that they do, even though we spent the past half hour or so talking about all the things that could go wrong. We hope we did that in a good-natured way that people actually want to have sex more than they did before they listened to this show. So in 1981, the hepatitis B vaccine came out, and hepatitis B is an important sexually transmitted infection. It's about 50 to 100 times more infectious than HIV. And so that was a critically important vaccine. And in about 1990, it became a normal part of childhood vaccination. So if you're like 35 years old or younger, you've probably been vaccinated for hepatitis B, and that's great. And if you're older than that, you can certainly talk to your physician about getting that. Now, in 1995, valacyclovir came out, Valtrex, that sort of thing. A lot of your listeners are probably familiar with that. And that reduces the number of outbreaks and it suppresses the amount of virus that somebody has the HSV virus in their body. And that has prevented, not only helped people be more comfortable who have HSV, certainly that's probably the main thing, but it's also certainly reduced the number of infections or how likely someone is to be infectious. So we were talking about safe sex earlier, Eve. Imagine if somebody tells you, I have genital HSV1, but my last outbreak was 2 years ago. I take valacyclovir every single day. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you'd probably be much more likely to have sex with that person because A, you would know that that person knows what's going on with their sexual health. And
Yes.
that's a lot smarter than somebody just saying, I don't know, I think I'm clean.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And then in 2006, the HPV vaccine came out. In 2012, we had PrEP, the HIV preventative medication. In 2013, hepatitis C became curable. And so hepatitis B is preventable and hepatitis C is curable. And that's a completely different ball game than our parents' generations. And then in 2023, DoxyPEP, which has been crushing chlamydia and syphilis rates across the country. And Eve, syphilis had almost been completely eradicated from the United States not that long ago. And it has since started to make a comeback, but now DoxyPEP has bent that curve and pushed it back down. And that is certainly something that I hope before I die of old age, hopefully later rather than sooner, that nobody even has to worry about syphilis anymore. That would be a magical thing. So I just wanted to get through that timeline, Eve, because I love science and I love these medical breakthroughs. And I just see these as such positive things. And people are always so pessimistic about the modern world that we live in. But in many ways, it's better. And you can't deny that, especially when you look at these list of breakthroughs when it comes to sexual health.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just so exciting, to be honest, because we should not be thinking about sex in a fearful way. And I think that that is the bottom line. We can be sexually exploratory. We can really nurture our sexual health and our sexuality and our sex lives and have the best sex we've ever had. And so, with that being said, I want to jump into our role play, and this is going to be a fun one. So, what we're going to do is we're going to model a conversation about STI testing and about, say we just met, right? And
Okay.
we decided that you're a hottie and I want to have sex with you. And so we're going to go to the back rooms. But before we do, we're going to have this conversation. And I want to just sort of model what this sort of conversation would look like. So are you ready?
And am I supposed to be someone who knows a lot about this, or am I supposed to sort of play bad cop here?
You can do whatever you want. And we'll see how I respond.
Fair enough.
Okay. All right. And action. Ladies, whether you are just starting your menopause journey or well into it and have questions about hormone replacement therapy, you're not alone. Many women experience vaginal dryness, decreased sensitivity, and urinary incontinence, like leaking when you sneeze, laugh, or exercise. These symptoms can be frustrating and limiting, but they are also very treatable. I experienced this myself and decided to try Parlor Game's topical estrogen and progesterone creams. Within 1 month of consistent use, my incontinence completely resolved. Topical estrogen helps restore tissue health, improve sensitivity, and support bladder control, while topical progesterone supports hormonal balance. If you are ready to stop suffering in silence, check the show notes for the link to Silky Peach, the topical estrogen cream, and Vibrant Third, the topical progesterone cream. I feel relieved and confident again, and I know you can too. If you've ever wished sex could feel more connected, more intense, or honestly just more fun, you need to check out Shameless Care. They're a telemedicine company built entirely around sexual health, real doctors, real prescriptions, and products that actually work. Like Shameless Chemistry, their oxytocin plus tadalafil blend that deepens connection and boosts arousal. Or Shamelessly Aroused, a topical cream with the active ingredient found in men's ED medication, increasing blood flow exactly where it counts. Every order includes a short video introduction from your doctor, transparent pricing, and no subscriptions ever. Just real, sex-positive healthcare that delivers results. Because you're a Please Me listener, you can use coupon code PLEASEME for $15 off your order of any product on the Shameless Care website. Use the code PLEASEME, that's PLEASEME, at checkout to claim your $15 off. Again, that's shamelesscare.com, code PLEASEME. Because great sex shouldn't be complicated. It should be shameless.
This episode is sponsored by Shameless Care.
So, I'd really like to go have some fun, but I'd love to know when your last STI panel was.
Well, that's a great question. I'm glad we're having this conversation. It makes me feel more comfortable as well. So I am STI tested every 3 months, and my last one was about 6 months ago. How about you?
Okay, so every 3 months, but it was 6 months ago,
I'm
so
sorry,
you
six
must be
weeks
due.
ago. I apologize.
Okay. Like, wait a minute, that math isn't mathing for me.
It
Okay, so
didn't.
you had a test six weeks ago, you said?
That's correct.
Do you by chance have your results on you? I also try to get tested every time I go to the doctor's office. So whether I go for a cold or whether I go for whatever it may be, I always just ask to get tested. And I was tested about 8 weeks ago. So I'm happy to share those with you if you're okay to exchange.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I'll log in right now and show them to you.
Fantastic. That makes me feel so much safer and more comfortable. So I appreciate that you carry those tests with you because I mean, I want to just make sure that I stay healthy and obviously I want that for you too. So fantastic. Are you by chance on prep?
No, I'm not on prep.
Okay. That's fine. I'm not either. I just like to know because it just gives me a little bit more information about you and maybe your behaviors. So I also am not on prep. Have you ever been vaccinated for HPV?
I have. Yeah, I was vaccinated for HPV maybe about like 15 years ago. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, that's great. I have not been vaccinated, unfortunately, and I did ask my doctor about it, and they said that I was too old. So unfortunately, I have not been vaccinated, but I'm glad to know that you have. That makes me feel even better. So let's see. What else do I want to ask you? Do you have any questions for me?
Well, sorry to break the fourth wall here, but you can learn a lot from looking at someone's test results. But I think what's really important is that, but shameless care, the test results are really easy to understand. And if people can get tested through their personal physician using their insurance, believe me, I think they should definitely consider that. But oftentimes, those test results are made to be interpreted by medical professionals. And so, for example, when you look at hepatitis B, often you get three results back. And they can be very confusing because if you've been vaccinated, one of those is going to say positive, and it's not obvious to a layperson which one of those that it is. So when you're trying to share test results in person like this, it can be a little bewildering if you're actually going to like my chart or something like that and trying to show them the test results. I can read them, but I dare say that a lot of people definitely cannot. And so I think having easily readable results is really fundamental if you're going to share them in this way. Yeah.
Great point that the shameless care test results are easier to read than generally because if you're showing positive to me that means you're positive, right?
Mhm.
But if you've been vaccinated for something you will show positive for that particular issue. So good point. I love that. All right, well, I want to make sure that all of my listeners can find you, Robert. Where can we find you?
We have a podcast called Sex is Good. You can also go to shamelesscare.com. And when you do, please be sure to use coupon code Please Me. You can also find me on YouTube, which is Shameless Care Official.
Yeah, make sure that you use coupon code please me if you're going to shamelesscare.com, whether you're going to get DoxyPEP, right? Or whether you're going to get the 14 panel test, or whether you're going to get any kind of medication for any STI like valcyclovir or any other that you may have. And also, we didn't even cover all of the medications that you have for erectile dysfunction or for women in decreased vaginal sensitivity and dryness. All of these medications are also available on shamelesscare.com, and there's some really great amazing new medications that actually I had Robert on a couple of weeks ago and discussed with him about some new medications for women because for the longest time men had their Cialis and Viagra but women had zero, we had nothing, and that is not the case anymore. Women also have medications now that can help them to have more sensitivity, have more blood flow because that is essential for women too. Want to just touch upon that before we jump off?
Sure. And I have a story about that. So I was in the
Yes.
playrooms at Naughty New Orleans, and there you have to be dressed down or nude. And my wife and I were nude. And it was really interesting because we were walking down the hallway and this woman who I know, but I hadn't seen her since last year. We've never had sex together, but we've talked and she's a customer and stuff like that. And she walks up and she's also naked and she puts her arm around me and she says, I just had amazing sex. And yes, I'm on Shameless Desire. And yes, it works, which was just so great. It was so refreshing to actually see people in person and loving it. But yeah, absolutely. I know you're getting towards the end of the show here, Eve, but erectile dysfunction medications have been available for men for 30 years. But they do a lot of the same things in women that they do in men in terms of increasing blood flow to the genitals when aroused. And the benefits of that, the research shows, is really quite profound in terms of, for a lot of women, decreased pain during sex, increased lubrication, increased sensitivity, and so on. And the medications can be quite safe for a lot of women. And so we have a lot of different varieties of those and combinations of those at shamelesscare.com. You can always try them. It might change your life for the better. If you try them and it doesn't work for you, one of the things that's just foundationally different about Shameless Care versus any other telehealth platform that I know of is that we don't have subscriptions. So you're not going to get rebilled, you're not going to get refilled unless you love it enough that you actually come back in and place an order. And for me, that just comes back to consent. Being a sex positive person, I don't want anybody to send me money just because they forgot to cancel or manage their subscription. I want them to come back to us because they loved it and they intended to come back to us. And so that's what's so important to us. And I know you share that philosophy as well, even. So be sure to use coupon code please me at shamelesscare.com.
Absolutely. I just love this so much that somebody came up to you and was like, yes, I'm using the Shameless Desire and it's working. I love that. And
Yeah.
I have a sexual longevity protocol, and part of my protocol is discussing medication and using it in conjunction with some of the other behaviors that I talk about in the protocol, because it can really enhance what you're trying to do, which is prolong your sexual longevity, right? So, with all of that being said, thank you so much for being on the show today, Robert. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, Eve.
Until next time, thank you for joining me on another episode of Please Me. I believe our sex lives shouldn't get worse as we get older. They should become richer, more connected, and more pleasurable with every step we take towards authentic expression. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you care about. You can also join my Friday newsletter for exclusive content and episode previews, follow me on social media, or visit pleaseme.online to learn more about my courses, affiliate partners, and ways we can work together. If you've been watching on Spotify or Patreon, the artwork behind me is part of my limited edition signed boudoir collection. Each piece is available in a small exclusive run, and every purchase helps support the continued growth of Please Me. We all deserve love, and we all deserve pleasure. I'll see you next time on Please Me.